Hello. I've been talking about various topics, and this time I thought about talking about source of happiness because entire goal of everybody's life is to be happy. We, as human beings, created air conditioning so that in hot weather we can be happy. We created houses so that we don't have to get soaked in the rain and storms. And so everybody tries to be happy, but sometimes we feel that the source of happiness is somewhere outside us. And I thought of doing this because it is kind of a deeper meaning into it. Maybe one of these days I can get into it. So I just wanted to talk about the source of happiness. A lot of times, if you talk to the kids and if you give them a lollipop or somebody who loves cakes or candies, and ask them where is the source, and of course the answer would be, of course, it's in a candy or it's in a cake or it's in a lollipop. So everybody thinks that the lollipop sucking or eating a cake will give you a happiness or a pleasure. Certainly it's true to some extent, especially with the kids, but is it truly there? If somebody is sick and has a fever and has altered taste, same lollipop or a candy may not produce the same effect. And there are lots and lots of people who don't like sweet stuff. And certainly eating a sweet stuff like candy or cakes will not cause pleasure to them. And this holds true about every other sense organ. Let's take, for example, music. If source of pleasure is in the music, then everybody should love rap music. Everybody should love opera. Everybody should love Indian classical music, or for that matter, anything, rock and roll, heavy metals. But different people have different likings. Some people prefer opera music, others absolutely hate it. The sound is same. So if the sound is same and we are hearing the same music, why is the reaction different? So certainly the source of pleasure is not in the music itself. As an adult, if you take it, say for example, somebody who loves steaks or chicken, they'll feel that the source of pleasure or happiness is in the chicken or is in the steak. But those who are vegetarian will not find eating steak or chicken to be happiness. So is the source outside you or is it inside you? You can go into an extent of every organ, including sex. If act of sex is outside pleasure, then even the rape should have been happiness, but it is not. So there is something more to the happiness than just external source like sweet candies or cakes or great music or touching or seeing or everything else. So somebody might then come out and say, well, the source is in your eyes, like the beauty is in beholder's eyes. Well, let's look at it. Are we really seeing things or is it beyond it? If you look at it, when the light rays are reflected from an object, it goes through our pupil and goes to the retina, which is like a film of a camera. And from there, through an optic nerve, the impulses are sent to the brain, which is in the back part of your brain called occipital lobe. But how is an image creates an emotions? Think about it. If I see a dog barking and it is not my dog, I will have a same image causing fear. But if it is my dog, then I will either feed him, control him, shout at him, or control or act in such a way to discipline him. So the reaction that I have is very different than the reaction that is generated in my brain when it is my dog versus not my dog. Think about the same thing about your child. If you see your child, how an image which is deposited or reflected in the occipital lobe creates an emotion. What kind of chemicals are involved? And if the chemicals involved are exactly the same thing, why is my reaction different? Yeah, are you following me? For example, suppose we both sit at a dinner table and somebody brings in a steak and I'm vegetarian. You would start watering your mouth and would have, oh my God, when can I grab the piece of that juicy steak? Well, for somebody like me who is a vegetarian, that juicy steak would not create the same imagination. But we both are seeing the same image. So is it the brain or is it something beyond the brain which is creating the reaction? And certainly somebody would say, well, it's in the mind, because exposure to same thing which gives you pleasure creates memories and that causes the pleasure. But is it really true? Something else is observing the mind, right? Because if you're looking at yourself and thinking about saying, my mind is disturbed today, my mind is scattered in thoughts, my mind is lost in thought. So how does a mind act? Who is saying that the mind is not calm? Who is saying that my mind is excited? Who is saying that my mind is disturbed? And again, if you think about the previous example of steak or candy or cookie or whatever it may be, how is it that when I am thinking something and the stuff is still in front of my eyes and the same image is produced in the occipital lobe, I don't even see it. Remember, sometimes we say, well, I did not see it because I was lost in thought. So if the chemical reaction is generated to create an image in the brain is exactly the same thing, because the light is reflected through the eyes, through the optic nerve, and the impulse is carried to the brain, why is it that we don't have any emotional excitement? Say you have a bad news and you're looking at a juicy steak, you will have no reaction. You will not feel like your mouth is watering and you want to eat it. So there is something more involved. So number one, the reaction is different for different people in spite of external source being same. Number two, there are times when we are actually seeing the light is going, but we don't think about it because our mind is somewhere else. But who looks at the mind? Who is actually saying that mind is not quiet today? Who is saying that my mind is dull today? So there is something beyond the mind. And if you would call it as an intellect, or some people might say Chaitanya, or some other thing, that's the consciousness. But is the consciousness independent of everything else? And is it observing externally? What I'm asking is more questions than answers, and I know that. And there are some answers which are given to us in a religious form. But everybody will have their own answer as to what sees things, what causes happiness. And is it external? That certainly I have proved to be not true. But certainly an external thing is needed and a previous experience is needed. So those two things are there, but sometimes in spite of both those two things, that means I have tasted a pizza or a cake and I have liked it, but the same cake or pizza will not initiate the same reaction if my mind is not into it, or if my eyes are not seeing it even though it is in front of me. Just a food for thought. Maybe next time we can talk a little bit about consciousness and power behind this. Thank you. Have a nice day. If you like it, please subscribe.